Call the meeting to order at 6:32 p.m. Pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Laws, Chapter 38, Section 18, and the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place, this meeting of the North Reading School Committee is being conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted, but every effort will be made to ensure that the public can adequately access the proceedings as provided for in the order. A reminder that persons who would like to listen to this meeting while in progress may do so. Call into 1-470-327-0958. The Google Meet. In terms of attendance, we have myself, Scott Buckley, Richard McGowan, Janine and Briano in person. We have member Chris Papavasilio on the Google Meet. Diana Bevel is not here right now. She had a prior obligation, but may join if she can later on. We also have our superintendent, assistant superintendent, and we will begin with public input. I assume there's no public input since I see no public members other than Sophia. We're going to move to the student report. We are lucky to have Sophia Galoppo. How do I say it? I always say it wrong. Class of 2022 here to share a student report. Sophia?
Hi, everyone. I hope everyone's well. I'm going to start off with academics. So basically, hybrid learning's been going really well for most people. And a lot of us have found it almost easier to manage our time because our teachers are also trying to adjust to this new way of learning. And then on October 14th, the seniors had the opportunity to take the SATs at the high school, which went very successfully. In sports, of the few sports that were fortunate enough to have a fall season, they're now coming to an end. Field hockey finished their season on Tuesday with a record of 5-3-2. And yesterday, boys soccer had their final official game where they concluded a great season of 7-1-2. Girls soccer has their last game this Sunday at 11 o'clock a.m. due to a rescheduled game against Pentucket. Both boys and girls cross country have their last meet tomorrow at home. The boys team holds a record of 2-2, while the girls team holds a record of 0-4. And golf has had a great season as well, and they have a record of 6-4. Last week, all of the teams were really disappointed when we found out that the Cal tournament was canceled due to a rising in cases of COVID-19. This has brought all of our seasons to a really abrupt end. Clubs are starting to spring into action. Most of them are actually taking advantage of the hybrid model to maximize participation and attendance, as well as last week, all clubs had picture day. Student Council completed their annual food drive last week. Interact Club is holding a candy drive for troops overseas through this Friday. And Powder Puff will be held this year, but signups were due today. And it's going to be a modified game for COVID regulations, and it's going to be a competition in which individuals compete for the farthest kick, punt, and pass. On October 23rd and 24th, Maskers had a lot of success with their haunted walkthrough to celebrate Halloween. And then for student work, I wanted to just touch on how we're conducting labs right now for the hybrid system. So I'm in AP Bio, and it's usually a very lab-oriented class, and we're still taking advantage of that. So we basically have two styles. One is completely virtual through a computer app called Gizmos. And in that, we basically follow a story and need to solve a problem by performing tasks. And all of the tasks are related to the topic that we're investigating. And then a more hands-on way of doing labs is there's a group that's in person and the group at home. So an in-class person will be partnered with a at-home person, and they'll do the whole investigation by basically presenting via Google Meet to their partner, which is actually really cool because you're not only learning as like the regular lab, but you're learning in a way that you have to be able to explain what's going on. And then one example I had of that was we investigated the tonicity of solutions and how that affects potato cells. And we would use Google Sheets to share our information, and then figured out how we could use all of the technology to work with graphs and presenting our data.
Very much. Any comments or questions?
I have a quick question.
Good.
You mentioned something about a candy drive for the service personnel overseas.
Yes.
That's like Halloween candy, or are you looking for something specific?
It's very general. So the idea is because it's like around Halloween, it's to bring in like your leftover candy. But I'm assuming all donations are greatly appreciated.
And where are you collecting that stuff?
At the main office, there's a bin that should be labeled.
Oh, cool. 'Cause
Did you want to run to your house and grab your candy and bring it back?
yeah, that's what I was thinking, because I actually wasn't around here for Halloween, but I bought a bag just in case my husband got a couple of people knocking on the door. And I generally don't eat candy, and my kids aren't around to eat it, so I was thinking, hey, good opportunity. Maybe I'll swing it by during the school hours.
Good. Rich, any questions?
Sophia, are you on an athletic team this fall?
Yeah, I'm on the girls soccer team.
So how did you think all that work, notwithstanding the tournament being canceled? How did you feel about the experience with the various COVID restrictions?
It was definitely different, but obviously I'm very grateful that we were able to have the season because so many of my friends in other towns got that taken away from them. So it was just so great to be able to be playing. Like, of course, it was a big adjustment at first because you don't realize the little rules changing really impact the game so much, but it was a really fun season, and it's so sad that it had to come to an end.
It was good. Thanks.
All right. The only comment I'll make is I went to the haunted Halloween walkthrough or whatever it was called for maskers, and it was great as all the things the maskers are, and it was just really cold on Saturday night. My kids were freezing by the end, but no, it's great that they were able to have this. And so it's just nice seeing the resilience of people. When we walked in today, you see the band practicing in the parking lot right now, and we will all remember 2020. So, okay. Chris, do you have any comments or questions, or?
No, thanks for sharing this stuff with us.
Sophia, congratulations on your win yesterday.
Thank you so much.
I just had a question for you. Later this evening, we're just speaking about a couple of things that are might be of interest. I would just like your input. I know that's something we talked about this year, as having your input on some of the items on the agenda. And one of the items I was curious about, we're introducing the concept of a remote snow day this year, which you might think of it being used possibly in place of a delayed opening, where everybody would just be in remote that day instead of trying to drive to school if it's icy, and then obviously those days, would need to be snow days that would need to be made up later in the year. And that's something that we're going to be sharing out. But what is your thoughts on that from a student perspective?
That actually sounds like a really cool idea because I'm a new driver. I just got my license basically, so thinking about driving in snowy conditions makes me a little nervous, so I'm assuming I'm not the only one. So just almost that ease of being able to just have that remote option seems really great.
Thanks for the feedback.
Good. And I don't know if you've got a copy of the agenda, Sophia, but are there any other things that I mean, you're welcome to stay as long as you like tonight, but I don't know, I mean, Dr. Dale is going to do a school reopening tonight. We're going to have a large capital presentation, the school calendar we just talked about, civics project update, and then some policies. I don't know if you have any interest in anything or want to weigh in on anything in particular, because we're happy to discuss whatever you want first if you would like.
I didn't have anything in mind that I thought needed mine.
Perfect.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you very
for
much.
having me.
Okay. I know that committee member, Diana Botwell, is having trouble trying to get into the link, so she can text me about that. So we're going to go on. We have no new business. Or no, we have continued business first. School reopening update, as we always seem to start now. Dr. Daly?
Sure. Might need to retitle it, because I think I've been in school now for quite some time. It's really just a school update. Just this year, it's just, updates on what's happening, but there's just so much happening. Certainly a COVID-19, we have seen a slight uptick in our schools, just as we have everywhere. To date, there's no confirmed transmission within the schools, which is very good. We have seen several students. There have been students at the kindergarten level. We've had students at some different schools, some staff members that have tested positive and others that are close contact. I want to just give particular attention to our nurses who are absolutely going above and beyond every single day. I mean, not only are they checking daily health screenings every morning, but the time that they put in to make calls, to contact trace, and really just to huddle up and brainstorm and every day there's something new coming down the line that we need to think about. We're working very closely with the Department of Public Health in the town, with the public health nurse and Mr. Bracy as well, and it's just been a positive experience, but people are definitely exhausted, putting in a lot of time, and it's I think last weekend, we're good last weekend, but the previous 3 or 4 weekends, there was always a conversation and calls to be made. But the students have adjusted well. The teachers, in a few cases where we've had a quarantine, we have a situation right now where we're in a quarantine, but the educators have been well, and even though they're in the quarantine, and they've been well enough to teach remotely, so the class has just shifted to remote learning. And the teachers have made the adjustment, the paras, everyone who is out of the quarantine has made the adjustment, and we've continued with learning. It's not, obviously, especially for kindergarten, it's not the same experience as you have in person, but we've made it the best possible situation that we could possibly make it. And we continue to have, I think we've heard from the state, from the governor, that the transmission levels in schools are not low. I think schools are a safe place to be. As I said before. What's that?
You said are not low, but they are low.
They are, yeah.
Transmission levels are low.
Transmission is low, I'm sorry. They are not high. And the idea that, students are safely 6 feet apart, masked, and very clean. Our custodial team is doing a phenomenal job. We have incredible equipment that Michael helped to procure over the summer to keep our building safe. And I think we're certainly heading in the right direction. I wanted to update on the fall sports and extracurriculars. It is wonderful that we played. I've been able to get to all the games and see the students playing a variation of the games that they're used to, but they're certainly a lot closer to a typical year, and I think people are used to that. We've had our spectators. Our system that we worked on to get our fans in the stands has worked well. As mentioned, unfortunately, due to some districts getting into the red and having some concerns about postseason play, the postseason was canceled. And there's really no more information to date about the winter season. I was, under the impression we would have something by the end of the week. There may be something coming tomorrow. But it does not look like we will have typical winter sports season starting after Thanksgiving. I don't think we're positioned to do that with basketball or hockey or those type of sports. But there will be additional guys coming, and I think you know, I'm optimistic at the very least that we will be looking to that floater season to see what other sports we can fit in, because we want to try, and I think the state and all the coaches and all the administrators across the state want to get as many opportunities for students as possible. It just might, like everything else, might look a little different this year. Extracurriculars are similarly starting up. We're at the secondary level. We have clubs that are running virtually that are going to be happening both at the middle school and the high school. And some are underway and others are ready to begin very soon. So that process is well underway and students are able to participate in those activities. And, you know, we had our professional development day on November 3rd on Tuesday. I had the pleasure of continuing to work with all the art, music, performing arts, phys ed, health, and that team of about 30 people, it was just such an incredible energy. You can imagine the creativity in that group, in that space. And just, it was so positive, just sharing great ideas, you know, who's having success with different aspects of hybrid, who has questions, who can help. And, you know, we focused all of our discussion around, all the educators this year have two goals that are driving the work they're doing. One around hybrid teaching and learning, one around social justice. And the administrative team identified a series of essential questions for us all to grapple with, and the discussions in my group and as reported across the district were incredible. And I think the teachers are, you know, committed to doing hard work around goals this year, but really trying to get them to see that this isn't extra work and, you know, one more thing they have to do, that if they can identify these as goals and we can help them to provide the resources and supports that they need, that the goals are really going to be the foundation for the work we do. And for everyone to identify what's working well, where they can improve, so that we can strive for continuous improvement. So that's the focus of what we're doing. And I think that, you know, what I'm hearing, I did my brown bag lunch check-in where typically I go to each school and sit there during lunch and people come and we talk. This time I did it virtually, but I certainly heard loud and clear from our teachers and staff that what they're doing is working. They have questions, they have struggles, it's exhausting, they're working harder than they've ever worked, and they're exhausted. And I've been saying, and I'll say it again later tonight, but I keep saying that we're pioneers in a lot of ways. Not a lot of districts started on September 17th, not a lot of districts have been going continuously in person, hybrid, but in person every day. And we're kind of at the head of that line. And we don't really know when we need breaks and what those breaks need to look like. And so some of what we're going to suggest to talk about more tonight is about just giving some of that very welcome, respite to our teachers that absolutely need that. So we're going to talk more about that. But overall, there is, despite the fatigue, I think is a good way to say it. There's a lot of positive energy out there. I think people are still happy to be back at school. And we're now focusing on sort of those next issues that are out there. One major thing that we're looking at is how can we continue to work with those students that are most at risk when they're at home, and trying to expand and support in different ways students that are not doing well in the remote environment. So we have a lot of different ideas that we've been discussing. We spent a lot of time with our administrative team coming up with some solutions, some that are broad and can bring in people quickly, and others that are going to be a little bit more complex. But we certainly have that on our radar now. That's really the next phase. As I said, reopening has happened, and now it's really about continuation, because all indications are we're going to be in hybrid for the rest of the year. And, you know, the other indication is that I don't see us going to full remote. The big game changer was when they said, if you're in red, you do not need to close all your schools. So as long as we have the staffing and there's not a huge outbreak, if it continues as it is right now, I see us pretty much staying open and staying in hybrid. So we now have to make some adjustments to make sure we understand how to make that as successful as it can possibly be this year. And so I don't know if there are any questions about reopening or about anything that we're doing right now.
Chris, any questions?
I just want to ask two things about on the operational side of things. As Dr. Daly mentioned, I think from a facility management point of view, I think the custodians are doing an exceptional job. I think we're now really into a flow of just what was sort of doing things differently and sort of a new job. back in mid-September is now seems very routine in terms of the cleaning that occurs every single night and the touch points. They really developed a nice routine, a nice rhythm. So I'm certainly pleased to see that. On busing too, we had an administrative meeting today, and I think principals continue to report it. So I think that's in a nice flow, and in terms of the timing and that's things that seem to settle in as we would expect, a couple months in. So I think certainly bus transportation is a nice rhythm and a nice flow, and adapting to the change in schedules and cohort ridership. And from a food service perspective, again, I think the food service program and team there under Anna McGovern and Charles' leadership has been doing a really exceptional job as well. We continue to pursue opportunities of how to increase the federal revenue. So there was an email that went out just about a week ago that now announced to the community that we are now offering meals for weekends. So that's part of their USDA's federal extended program to the end of the year, is you now can claim and provide meals for weekends. So we have added last Friday, we actually started it, and tomorrow will be the second Friday where families have the opportunity to come and pick up meals for both for Saturday and Sunday, and that includes both breakfast and lunch. Another thing that USDA announced is that you no longer, for this one school year, need to be what is referred to as area eligible, or a district that has a population of economically disadvantaged of 50% or greater to participate in the subsidized after-school snack program. So we are in early conversations with the YMCA program that does the after-school program at our elementary schools to kind of take over that after-school snack program. We are working with we actually have a meeting with the conference call with the DSE tomorrow to try to get after-school snacks added to our agreement at the elementary schools, so we can start providing that in the after-school programs and receive some federal reimbursement for that as well. So a lot happening, a lot changing all the time, but I think there's definitely a rhythm and a flow of what's happening from an operational standpoint in those areas.
Thank you, Michael. Chris, any comments, questions?
No, I don't. Thank you.
Rich?
I did have a question for Dr. Daly, and I've forgotten what it was. So I guess no.
No. Denise?
No.
My only comment/question was about the remote learning. I know that there's a lot of challenges, with trying to get the Parks and Rec program up and running, and I know that you were able to talk to the YMCA and get something up, and I saw the emails go out about 13 at each elementary school. I'm just wondering what the interest level was, kind of how that's going. Did that start already, or?
It is scheduled to begin. They're just working out the final details. The initial demand was not, didn't surpass the 13 at each school. There was, I believe, the bachelor the highest demand, and so we're just figuring out the locations. But we're at, I think it's about 10 to 15 total that came in very quickly. And again, we just sent it out less than a week ago. I think, some folks have probably made some other arrangements, but what's happening is as more schools are starting to go back, or people might be starting to go back to jobs, things are changing at home. So it's just another option that people have. So we're happy to get that out there for folks, and that will be starting very soon. So the YMCA was able to facilitate that with us, and we will keep you posted on what that looks like. And like I mentioned before, we're also exploring some other options for the students that are most at risk for not being successful. So we've heard from some of those parents and teachers as well about students that it's just really challenging in that environment. I think it's frustrating for everyone, but there's a difference, and that's going to be that's the difficult decision is, for the principals to understand the difference between those that are really struggling and having an issue. We wish we could bring everyone in. I think it's important to clarify that as well, because I do get that question a lot. Why can't we just bring everybody back? And I think people need to understand that part of the reason why it is working right now is we are at the 6 feet. We are keeping all those safe distances. That's what our Board of Health has approved. That's what we've been able to negotiate with everyone. And it's also what we feel is safe. And it's more than just in the classrooms, it's also the entire school, right? So all the buses, all the lunches, we couldn't run lunches the way we're running them if we had twice as many people. We couldn't have twice as many people in the hallways at the same time, efficiently between classes, spaced as we do. I mean, right now it's running really well, and the students really are maintaining that safe distancing. When you double the amount of people, you're more than, you're increasing that risk. And any chances that we take or rushing anything back jeopardizes everybody having to go out, which we don't want to see. And we're seeing a lot of districts that are completely remote, and we're trying to keep that hybrid. I think you're seeing a push from the state to support the model that we have, which is 3 days and 2 days, each, alternating weeks. So I think if the Department of Ed were called and questioned about the North Reading model, they would say you're doing everything that you need to do right now. I don't think there's any, the governor or the commissioner, I think, would definitely think that I'm very confident to say they would be very pleased with what we're doing here in North Reading. I think when they talk about other ideas, they're concerned with districts that are in full remote. That's what their focus is. And I'm confident that from all the conversations that I've had with the commissioner, basically weekly since last March. But that is a question that does come up.
And I was just going to have a comment on that one thing that the governor said earlier, I think it was earlier this week, that was, I'm not sure he meant it exactly like this, but when he said it was a mistake to shut the schools down in April,
yeah,
that was a bit of an unfortunate comment in my view, just because I don't think it's true. I don't think anybody at the school level really thinks it's true. It was a completely different situation than it is right now.
yes.
But people shouldn't take that as, the governor and Desi is really encouraging people or schools to go back to full in person without, taking the proper precautions.
Absolutely. And he has the hindsight, you got to remember back in April, I was going to the grocery store and watching all my groceries, bringing them in the house. We didn't know if it was on the table. We didn't know anything at that time. And it really wasn't safe because we just didn't know.
And there was a much more of the disease, of the illness. It was more prevalent in Massachusetts. So.
Exactly. And we've learned so much since then and be able to make adjustments and set up our schools in a safe way. But I think the point is, I think also what he was saying was, from the student feedback and the student learning perspective, it's never a good idea to have students not in school. And so, there is a ripple effect of students being out of school with the economy. And I think that's all true. And I think that's why, as I said earlier, I see us staying in a hybrid model at least. I don't see us going to full remote, which again, begs the question of, needing some breaks. So we'll talk about that again later.
Okay. Other comments? Moving on to large capital presentation. Mr. Connolly.
There is an updated PowerPoint, which I'm going to just go through quickly. I think Dr. Daly will pull it up for the folks on the call. But I think we had a very good discussion and conversation at the last meeting, and there was some good comments and feedback raised. And we have an update to the capital plan. So everything you kind of got last week is a little bit of an update to it. We had the opportunity to firm up some numbers with some proposals that came in between the October meeting and this evening from facility projects. And then we had an opportunity to go back and take a nice closer look at our technology needs and our Chromebooks and the age of the Chromebooks by grade level, as well as the ones that are kind of on order that are still back ordered, quite honestly, and looked at it realistically and said, what are the needs? So there's some updates to the numbers. I'll just kind of touch upon them. The 3-year chart has changed somewhat. Mainly the technology and the facilities, there's been some adjustments to those requests. So in light of the conversation last week, Dr. Downs, digital learning director, and myself got together. Dr. Daly weighed in, and we do feel like the $60,000 request was probably too small. Again, we're trying to be ultra kind of conservative from a budget perspective. But that 60,000 generally would support one grade of acquisition and replacement. As you know, we have K through 12, our one-to-one environment, where previously last year it was 7 through 12. So it is true that we've doubled the amount of devices. Certainly the usage is greatest than it's ever been. And we feel like at minimum, we really need to look at 2 grades of replacement. So this would get us about 400 devices, which would cover replacement of 2 grades with some additional devices for other needs as needed in some other areas, because there's not quite 200 students per grade. So we've gone and we've looked at the age of the equipment between grade 7 and 12 and the age of the equipment between kindergarten and grade 6. Some of those grades do have devices that are 5 years old. So we think that they're at the end of their useful life, so at minimum between what would get repurposed from 12th grade down and what we need to acquire is we could do it with 400 devices at 2 grades on an annual basis. That also takes into consideration what's kind of on queue that we will receive at some point late winter that are back ordered. So we would bring those devices up to speed as well. So we do think with the combination of next year, there might be quite honestly 4 grades that might need replacement next year. So I think we looked at it and there are 4 grades that are grade 5 years old. But with what's on queue coming in and with this allotment, we think we'd be covered. And then on an ongoing basis, we do think we need to double that annual request from 60 to 120 at minimum and need 2 grades of replacements. That would really focus on student devices. There's also a need for staff devices as well. So we've looked at that. We're using federal funds this year to do a replacement of the majority of the elementary staff devices, which are in the worst condition, of the oldest condition. So again, some of those are back ordered, but we're slowly getting those in and we're putting those right into action, right into cycle with the elementary instructional staff. So we actually feel like we'll certainly need an allotment of $30,000 to $40,000 on an annual basis after we get this huge amount of or big bulk order that comes in this year with the federal funds. And we actually feel like through the operational budget, we might focus on those staff devices with that annual allotment. That cost per unit is about $800. We think that we might need between 40 and 50 devices there. But we think the large capital would focus mainly on the student devices at about 400 devices a year. That again does 2 grades, and it does give us an extra 30 or 40 devices potentially to shift around as needed. And then we think that minimum, that's the need. So we have made that adjustment. That was based on a lot of the feedback as well from the last meeting. No changes here. We still think we need certainly the 45,000. We're still using these devices, and we still think this request that quite honestly would have been funded this year had things stayed kind of normal. But we think this needs to happen, and there's certainly one funding source among others, but we definitely need an allotment to take care of the instructional and classroom equipment that is being used every single day. This request stayed the same, the multifunction vehicle. We talked about it last time. This request stayed the same. We did get some updated pricing and looked at the extra attachments that we would need. And that amount we confirmed is a good amount to get us what we need, the $65,000 for the tool cat. Middle school paving project, we actually had 2 different companies come out. One was the town contractor and re-looked at the job, remeasured, re-quoted, gave us the quote for full replacement of that lot, and we did confirm that with the $100,000 allotment, it's about an $82,000 to $85,000 job. That gives us some extra funding for some review of traffic flow, engineering kind of traffic flow study, because there's some money available for that, as well as the striping that would need to occur as well. So we think that number is good, and we actually reconfirmed that number or trued up that number. So I think I said last time the $50,000 I had in there was kind of an estimate. We had we were waiting for the proposal. That proposal came in, and believe it or not, it was actually higher. It was just under $65,000. So I had to actually increase that amount. The picture there on the right was part of the proposal of what a finished product, example of what a finished product would look like. Again, that's kind of that vinyl soffit with an aluminum metal wrap is really what I was trying to say last meeting, is sort of what the result would be. But we did need to invest a little bit more money in this project based on the proposal. And we are due to kind of submit these projects to CIPC at the end of the month. When we submit to CIPC, we do need to put those in priority order, as we know, which sometimes, as you know, is a difficult task. So this is a snapshot of the FY22 jobs, which quite honestly is what the CIPC mainly focuses on. We do submit 3 years worth of projects. As you know, our plan involves 5. 5 goes out as much as 5. But this was the administration's priority list, feeling that, again, it's always been what's needed from an instructional standpoint and from a safety standpoint. Certainly the technology, with the environment that we're in is even more important than it's always been, but it's always been important with 21st learning tools and just the ability to have a one-to-one. We're never going to go back from a one-to-one environment throughout our district, so we need the equipment. We need to make these replacements. We need, one thing goes down, and we see it firsthand now when we walk through these classrooms, as Dr. Daly said now, I've heard him say it a few times. One area of these technologies break down, it's hugely interruptive to the whole process. So it really needs to be a focus. And certainly the paving, I don't think we can wait any longer on this. This is year 3. We're trying to get the funding for this. So that certainly needs to be a priority. And number 4 here, we certainly debated 4, 5, and 6. I think they're all important. 4 certainly has a significant payback, and it can just make our operation that much more efficient. In the soffits and the fascia, that's just sort of a maintenance item that needs to happen. And then again, the payback period on 4 and 6, 4 years or under is hard to argue with. So that's kind of where we fell, and we're asking for about $435,000 worth of projects for year 1. The memorandum in the packet laid out projects for years 2 and 3, fiscal 23 and 24, which again is not a huge focus. CIPC mainly focuses 1 year out, but again, they do look at what's coming in the pipeline as well. So, I think this captured the majority, the comments and the feedback from last week, but I want to open it up to discussion. We don't have to make a vote tonight, but I felt if we were comfortable enough and the data was there, we could, and that would allow us to move forward with submission to CIPC. So I'll open up to discussions.
Okay. I guess first, we have questions about the presentation or anything. And I have one quick question, which is the timing, if you can remind me, because my concern is that a couple of these items, if they don't happen, they're going to have to be part of our budget anyways, no matter what happens. And so I'm always concerned about when they make a decision on CIPC versus when we're doing the budget.
Yeah.
And I feel like sometimes it comes in after. Does it come in afterwards, or does it always final decision?
Great question. If everything works out perfectly on the timeline, we would be finalizing, the Capital Improvement Planning Committee would be finalizing their recommendations to submit to the Select Board for final approval sometime around the middle of April. So it would be right around the time we're doing our public hearing. And we don't vote the budget till the beginning of May now, so we should know by the beginning of April what their recommendation is going to be. So I think it would still allow us to make changes as needed if we felt something on that list wasn't getting the support by the CIPC.
I almost think we need to put into our budget some of the technology, and maybe even the tool cap, that can just be there as part of the budget, and then it can be a discussion on both ends. And then if it doesn't end up getting funded to CIPC, we can talk about it and almost go over there. Rich?
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a, what's the strategy too, going into the discussion? With this, that happened in CFPC between now and April, and I don't know how much discussion is done early or how much of it's really determined right at the end, but,
Yeah. So generally, what the process has been is requests will go in by the end of the month. The committee will probably meet to review the initial request early December, and then presentations will be scheduled. The school department's always done their presentation just prior to the winter break. So we typically are early in that list, kind of appear before Christmas. And then January, we complete the presentations by all the other departments, town departments, and then February, we make our site visits. And then March, we debate the ranking and follow up, and if there's follow-up that we need to receive from department heads that we have to make a decision, we make sure that happens. And then our final rankings are due usually by the end of March, and then in early April, we put together the recommendation to submit to the select board. That's kind of the process. So.
yeah, I guess I would just sort of piggyback on what Scott said. It feels like we should do all these projects this year, one way or the other. Just need to find that, I mean, I guess they're all either time sensitive or have payback or are, in the case of the technology, key to our, ongoing education.
Yep.
The soffits and fascia is not going to get any better, just, not being addressed. And we have the payback that we get from the tool CAD and even the multifunction activity vehicle, where it reduces our bus fees, right? So there is some value there.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess what I'm saying is agreeing with Scott that we probably need to keep that sort of strategy of trying to get all these done one way or the other as we go through it.
Right.
Obviously, if we can get them to agree to all of them, that'd be great.
I mean, it's
I
just,
don't know if there's any horse trading that's done in it,
Yeah, I mean, I think we'll have it in the case. So typically, we're going to release the budget early, mid-February. The school department, their superintendent's preliminary budget.
Yep.
Typically, I think we get a good sense after that presentation, and me being a member of the committee who's even privy to some of the dialogue afterwards, what's getting support and what's not getting support. So I think we'll have a little bit of a better sense of where, from a town perspective, where the funding is, what's going on the town end, what's pertinent, what some of these projects could be up against, to try to, a little bit better, to try to make some of those decisions. Do we need to kind of, head some of that by beefing up some of our operating lines? And I think that probably, would make some sense. I hear that. Yeah.
Janine?
Well, kind of along the lines of what you were just saying, having been on the CIPC before, I get the idea of it. It's things that don't normally come up every year, like you need to repaint the library or the, fire engines need to be replaced. But in the lines of technology, every year, both town, or I should say municipal and school side, always have technology in it.
Correct.
Wouldn't it make more sense, and if this is an ask you can take back to them, instead of taking it out of free cash, which they do, because you're not going to take out a loan for
Correct,
a
right.
piece of equipment that's going to be non-essential in 5 years, wouldn't it make more sense for the town to put that into the budget
Mm-hmm.
and then take those out so that you do have room for a tool cat, which you're not going to get every year, or, paving of a thing.
Yeah.
So is that an ask that you can take back to them and
Yeah,
can we
it's
take it off for technology?
It's
Because
it's a valid point, and I think it's a different approach than we've taken. But I think, I agree with all of what you're saying. I think in some ways some of this potentially should belong in the operational budget. It just hasn't, and this is the process we've gone through, both town, municipal, and school. Municipal has gotten an allotment for computer replacements through
CIPC on an annual basis as well,
Yeah,
so.
but 8 or 10 years ago, it was a way different scenario where
Yeah.
you might have had a laptop or a mainframe computer, whatever you want to call
Right.
it, that would last 5 to 7, 8 years. But now everyone needs a device.
Totally
Every
different.
town person,
I would agree.
municipal
I would agree.
person. So it just makes more sense to me to put it into the budget.
Yeah, and it's embedded into part of our day-to-day curriculum and what we do, and what we need for everyday learning.
But how that works out in terms of share of money that we're getting versus the town, that
Right.
gets a little tricky.
Right, so I think it has to be a town-wide
Yeah.
conversation,
It's
probably.
yes and no, because if every year we're going and asking for X amount, and every year the municipal side is going to ask for X amount.
Right, I think what I'm saying is I think it has to be a town-wide discussion that probably chairs and vice chairs,
Right.
because it's certainly gonna have an impact on the revenue plan. And funds that are typically available for other areas, if that money doesn't flow into the revenue plan. So if they're willing to make that adjustment, it's a accounting adjustment, you know, funds that are kind of over here designated for capital, through capital stabilization, through free cash that they set aside for capital, if that funds back to the operating dollars to the revenue plan, then that makes sense, and that can happen both on the municipal and the school side. Does that make?
It does. I think just to echo what you're saying, when I started here, you know, the capital plan was every few years. It's interesting, the numbers haven't really changed, even though it's 10 years later. If you go back and look at FY 10 and 11, when I started, the numbers are pretty similar. We used to buy computers for the high school, replace those, take the old high school ones and put them in the elementary, because it was this idea that, they could use the old Windows XP computer and they could still, you know, it's just the kids, they're running their little software program. It's not that way anymore. The kids today, the teachers today in those classrooms are running state-of-the-art stuff. Every kid's using it. And as we discussed, you know, we're absolutely, you know, one of the, you know, we talk about making lemonade out of, you know, taking lemons and making lemonade. You know, our students and teachers at grades K1, 2, 3 are using their Chromebooks every single day to learn. We're not going backwards from there. So that, you know, this is what it's going to be. Education, the way it looks, the way it feels, is going to be different forever after this year and last spring. And so we do need to support this in a different way and really think about it differently. And, you know, we do have to realize we are very conservative. We do stretch out our devices and get a lot of life out of them, but these Chromebooks have a lifespan. They're coming up. Our high school, you know, devices, believe it or not, stuff we bought for the high school is going to be 8, 9 years old next year. That's a long time for those devices, and those are still working, but we have to be thinking about those as well. So coming up with a plan to start slowly replacing the ones that are breaking and are no longer compatible is something we need to do to keep moving forward.
And I think the other thing that is probably true, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, but the fact that, you know, it's different when you're talking about students taking computers home with them every day, using them at home, using a thing, throwing them in their book bag, and I'm not saying they're not being careful, but it just adds to the wear and tear. It's not like they're sitting in a cart until they're used, and then they go back to the cart, and then they're safe. And
absolutely, and just the amount of use they're getting. It's not a nice to have. It's a you can't learn without this, and also they're using them every single day, every single period of every day, and it's just there's a lot of wear and tear in that too. They're getting good use though.
So it's an ongoing discussion, and,
yep.
and it may not be solved this year, but it's as long as we're.
I think it all makes sense.
And it's fair. I mean, those items didn't go through in July. They didn't go through in October. So we had requests for technology last year.
Right. So we were a year ago or so, after last year, we actually were attempting to move some of this into the operating budget, and then to balance, it got taken out, and then just to couple that, the CIPC technology got deferred as well. So yeah, I think, you know, I think hearing your comments, I think that there certainly makes sense. One approach I think we could take is we kind of move it forward as we've normally done, and you know, with a little caveat that we want to have further conversations about some of this pertinent technology for computers, and it makes sense to kind of have the money move and flow into the operating budget. And by submitting it, then we know that it's kind of on their radar, it's there, it's in front of them, and then we can bring it up in both to both groups really, to the finance planning team and to, CIPC.
It does feel like a lot of the discussion is a finance planning team discussion.
Right.
In terms of the longer term picture, whereas the request list obviously is critical for this year.
I think the key thing here is at least number one on this, probably number two, are things that we can't go without. I mean, there's no question we have to have the Chromebooks. If they're not funded through CIPC, they have to be funded another way. And I don't think that's what CIPC was originally for. And then even something like number four, the tool cap, is something where, frankly, with the amount of work that we're putting on our custodial staff right now, if they have to start doing everything by hand, we're going to either have to staff another person or we're going to have a better tool for them to use. Mm-hmm. And so my only point is just, again, I think we need to go about it both ways. And if the town decides we would rather, shift more funds into the funding of the operational budgets year to year, or change the percentage or something like that, but I don't think you can do that. So change the percentage because the town, the municipal side has a lot of needs, but they want to shift a little bit over there. We have to see what the budget's going to be this year. I'm sure it's going to be a tough budget year as it always is, but we are actually in a very good position from a free cash standpoint compared to other years. And so it's a discussion that has to take place.
Right.
But,
yeah, I don't even think it's merely a percentage basis. I think it's just, it's the assumptions in the revenue side of that equation. And the revenues can be adjusted to make room for some of these additional operating needs that then won't be the request through CIPC, which would free up for kind of real capital type one-time needs that we know there's a lot of. There's a lot of needs on the town side as well from the building improvement standpoint.
Chris, I assume you're in favor of everything I said and not anything anybody else said?
No, I'm in favor of everything Rich said. I mean, you guys are, you're making, I think, all the important points that need to be made. I don't know what the solution is, but it really seems clear that we need to find some sort of solution because, as you said, we can't do without one, and it seems foolhardy to go without four. I understand that in the scheme of things, why it would be ranked down as the fourth one, but still, you pose the idea that not getting that means we might have to hire more staff or hire some other tool. At the very least, it means that we're out, what did we say, $12,000 or somewhat each year we don't have it, as money's getting tighter. And it's tough, and I really hope that we can work something out. I don't know the right strategy to do that, but we need to figure something out.
Now we get to decide if we want our left hand or our right foot, and so we need to decide on the ranking of everything. I don't know if people have thoughts on, the administration's rankings of 1 through 6 for this year. The only thing that I would bring up, well, two things. Number one, on the soffits and fascia, I just wonder, I feel like right now materials are very, very expensive. I wonder if it might actually be a little bit better, in future years. And I have been a huge advocate of the little school paving project, but even I wonder if the toolcat is something that is, needed even before that, because if not, it'll be, out of the operational budget, it'll be adding staff. And so the one change that I might think about would be like 4/3, and maybe 6/5. But
here's where the strategy comes in, though. It's like what might we be willing and able to do ourselves this year, and is the cat one of them first?
Yeah.
So if we put it down, then seems weird to be saying this in a public meeting that anybody in the CIPC can be listening to, but and it's sort of it's there to be traded away, or But,
I mean, they like Michael said, like they're gonna rank however they want anyways, and so. But ultimately,
I think we're all in agreement on 1 and 2, and the others are, I guess, it's more of a practicality, more of a. I agree the toolcat. If we don't end up with a toolcat by September, one way or the other, it's probably not a good thing.
I just worry. We're strapped. We've been trying to add custodial staff overall.
No, I agree.
And this year, like, we're just doing so much, and I can't imagine when it starts snowing and we have to tell people, now we need 3 of you to go out to start shoveling when we're supposed to be, you know, like we get an afternoon snow, we have to have the schools ready for cohort B coming in, and now we have all of our custodians outside shuffling instead of one of them using the toolkit and the other people getting the school ready for the next day.
Good point. Yeah.
And so, I don't know. Chris, any thoughts on ranking?
It pains me to say it, but I agree with you, Scott. I think that this isn't the year for the paving project. It's not that it's not the year for the paving project, but it's that the toolkit and I think the multifunction vehicle should bump up to that, and that the we could probably better tolerate a delay on the paving project and the little school facade repairs than we could the others.
I guess the one thing you can say about the paving project is that well, I guess it's not really getting any less traffic or anything, is it?
There's only half the people there every day.
Right, but it's still the same number of cars and buses every time.
But there's, yeah, I mean, the thing in favor of the little school is it's all beat up right now.
Yeah.
And it'd be a nicer turn, you know, turn around, and like students are everywhere right now, and they're walking over.
Yeah.
They're walking over places that there's no, like, one of my concerns is that the PTA, the PTO donated $100,000 to make a playground, and there's no crosswalk to get over to the playground.
Right.
We're dropping kids off at every door now, and so you're walking over non-paved areas to get there, and it's dangerous. And so
Well,
that's the argument for being higher,
Yeah.
is that like
Yeah.
you need it now because you need better markings, and like people should know where they're going, and I don't know. Like I said, it's your left hand or your right foot, so I don't.
And I obviously don't observe the actual traffic there much or at all, but I mean, as you described that says to me let's leave it where it is.
Yeah. And if that's what the administrators wanted, I don't know that.
Does anyone have a crystal ball that can predict what kind of weather we're gonna have this year?
Snow started early.
Everyone's saying bad.
Someone says because the squirrels are dark, it's gonna be a bad winter. I don't know what that stands for true, but, I guess my point is, if we were sure that we were gonna have a mild winter, you might push off the toolcat a little bit more. But if it's gonna be
Well,
a pretty
all this is for
bad
next year
winter, like
anyway.
it was in 2012, you might wanna have a toolcat.
Yeah, but all of this is for next year anyway. We're not gonna.
Well, that's true too, yeah. So I don't
Right,
know.
It's hard because they're all needs. There's not, we really don't work. It's kind of nice to have.
Exactly.
I'd be fine with keeping it the way it is,
Yeah.
or possibly switching 3 and 4. That's the only thing that I would suggest. But if the administrators preferred this order, I mean,
Yeah.
I'd be
I would
fine
leave
with
it this way.
Okay.
Okay. So do we want to have a motion? There's a recommended motion. Somebody wants to read it? I have it if anybody wants to.
Is there a recommended one?
It's on the bottom of the memo.
I will move that the school committee vote to approve the large capital improvement projects and in the priority order presented by the administration to the capital improvement planning committee for fiscal year 22, 23, and 24.
I'll go ahead and second.
Okay. Roll call vote. Rich?
Aye?
Janine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, so it passes 4-0. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on. Dr. Daly, the school calendar.
Thank you very much. I just wanted to mention this. It's not necessarily, I put it on here as a vote just because I think it's just important to recognize. It's not as much a change to the school calendar as it is just giving some much needed and welcome rest to our staff. And the suggestion that I made prior, I would make that recommendation again, that for the calendar as currently constituted on the Monday, November 23rd, Tuesday the 24th, and Wednesday the 25th, which is a half day, leading into Thanksgiving, and then a similar set of days in December leading into the winter break, that we would approach those days as full remote days. students would still be learning. It would just be in remote, like many other districts are in remote. And this would just allow additional flexibility for all of our staff and families to make the best decisions around these holidays, and to just have a little bit of a different situation that just might bring that level of anxiety that everyone's feeling down a little bit about holiday gatherings. And, you know, this is an idea that came from my listening tour. I heard this from some of our teaching staff that shared this idea. I thought it was a good idea. I brought it to the administrative council. I brought it to our local group of administrators in town, and the chiefs and the Board of Health. The recommendation from that group was to just be careful that we position this. This is not meant to encourage additional travel or additional gatherings. It's just meant to be some additional flexibility, and really something that's well deserved for the staff that's been doing something for quite some time, and for our students as well, just to have some additional time and flexibility around the holidays. So my recommendation is for those 2 days, 2.5 days to be, the buildings would be open for the teachers or for anyone that wants to come in to teach from their classrooms. The buildings would be open, and we would be here as we normally are, and it would be open, but folks would have that ability to work from home. So, questions?
I think we brought it up last time, but there was some concern about the same cohort being off 2 days where the other cohort wasn't, and was there any talk about switching so that?
Yes, we will make sure that there's a balance, and I'll put that in my communication, that we'll make sure there's a balance. There was already a bit of an imbalance with the numbers by one, I think. So you remember, in that week B already wasn't coming in the end of the week anyway, because those are the holidays.
Right.
So this is balancing it a little bit more, and then we'll look at the numbers as the year goes on and make sure there's an even balance. But I know high school is the most complex, and they actually thought this actually helped correct some of the imbalances of the number of A green days, A gold days versus B green and gold. So they felt that would work out. But I'm sure we will make sure to balance that as well.
I think this is I think your reasoning for doing this are sound and make a lot of sense. And I think many families will welcome it. My only concern is families who are so reliant on, once they get the schedule locked in, they're so reliant on the schedule. But that's always, and this won't apply to everybody, but Thanksgiving week is always a sort of more flexible week, oftentimes for work. Anyway, so I mean, I think it's worth doing. We probably should recognize that it's not. It'll help some people, and other people it might actually inconvenience. But given the notice and the sound reasoning, I think we should go ahead and do it.
And this would apply to all students as well, even our cohort C students. And again, I recognize how important it is for those students to be in person, but giving breaks as needed and giving staff a chance to refresh properly is going to make that much more impact when they are in person, when they're back. And I think we'll look back on this as something that was positive, that helped us get through. As I've said many times, and I said earlier tonight, we've never had a year like this, and our calendar is built on a typical year. This is very different, and we need different breaks and different opportunities to refresh. And so we think this is a positive idea that we hope you'll support.
I thought it was interesting what you said about other folks from other departments in the town making the point about, you know, hopefully this will not encourage people to do extra gatherings that they might not. It probably won't anyway, but, you know, it does give them the opportunity to sort of reset and make sure everybody's healthy going into the whatever gathering they do end up doing. So that seems like a positive.
I mean, I think, I'll be honest, I'm a little back and forth on this one. I mean, I'm going to support it, just to be clear, but.
Well, you have more hands-on, you know, experience about what it's going to mean, right? To a family, yeah.
I mean, it's a tough week already, and then I mean, I think overall we've tried to prioritize time in school. And so the reason that we said we wanted, you know, learning to happen on Wednesdays was because, you know, we didn't want to have these beautiful buildings here without people in them. We believe in in-person learning. And so, you know, that's my concern. I mean, I have a student that's in cohort C, and I do know that for cohort C, that's particularly challenging. Even my 2 students that are not in cohort C, I think they like more the days that are in person, but I see the other side of it too. I think that, you wouldn't want to have, you get a close contact call because on Wednesday some kid came to school and now you're at your parents, you're just having Thanksgiving dinner with your elderly parents or grandparents on Thursday. And that is a very real concern that, this is talking about the last time you'd be in person with a student would be on Friday, which gives you 6 days before, you're in, going to do anything with anybody else. So I think it makes sense, and ultimately I support it because if the administrators and the teachers think that it's, a good way to do it, I don't think of it as much as like a break because there's still learning happening, but, I obviously will support whatever the group thinks is best. And so I just think there's a side on each, there's points on each side of it, but, I do feel like, supporting our teachers and our, paras and all of our administrators, it is very important, and I do see the need for the medical part of that just to make sure that you have a period of time before you are going to travel. And that also allows some people, if they're going to be traveling, they can get COVID testing and, not be in contact with anybody for a few days.
It's that flexibility and it's that relief. It's like you say, it's not a break. We're still learning, but it's a little different. A couple of people have expressed like what this would mean for them. Like they could, right now their parents are watching their children every day. Now they can let their parents have a couple of days off. Well, it's that whole spirit of giving thanks and just, there's a ripple effect of all those things that can happen. You're still working from home. Your children are doing their learning in the other room. You're teaching in this room, but you're able to keep an eye on them, and you might free up a parent. So, I mean, there's just so many different aspects of it that we've considered that we think this is a good recognition. And it's only those few days, and we think it's a good idea.
Okay. And so so we're changing the school calendar, I guess, to say it's a remote day?
We're not really going to change the school calendar. I'm just going to, my plan was to just put something out to say what that is, because I think similar to calling a snow day or changing a PD day, I think we're just saying this is what it will look like. Those days will be more remote.
Do you want to vote for this or?
I put it on there as a vote if you feel, I said it that way if we felt that we wanted to vote to support it.
I don't think there's any reason not to vote it, so.
I was just gonna say, I think just,
All right, I got a quick question.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I mean, it's a little silly, but it just bears asking. We have great communication going out to parents, but is there any chance that there will be some 1, 2, 3 families that might not realize there's been this change? That, is that something we need to worry about?
About here when they show up.
Yeah, I think it'll be, similar to what you see on a snow day. I mean, I would trust that there will be communication and plenty of reminders leading into that day as well as I would put out the message to everyone tonight, ahead of this, so you have a full 2 weeks to prepare, and then we would put out reminders. I probably would do it either myself or each principal, prior to each day that week, just to remind that everyone is in full remote. And also to communicate that the expectation, this is not a vacation, that we expect this, attendance will be taken, and everyone has the expectations of full learning on these days, and that will be a reminder every day, similar to any kind of snow day, where we would remind them each day. And I will say on some snow days, there's always a day where one student shows up at a school, and the buildings, as I said, will be open, and we'll be able to direct those students safely home if that does happen.
Okay, I have a motion to approve the change to the Thanksgiving and week of Christmas.
I'll make a motion to amend the current school calendar to allow for the remote learning for the days preceding Thanksgiving and the days preceding the winter break.
I'll second.
Well said, Janine.
Yep.
Roll call vote. Janine.
Aye.
Rich.
Aye.
Chris.
Aye.
And an aye as well, passes 4-0. Okay, civics project update.
Thank you. So tonight, typically, this is about when I would give you the update on the MCAS scores from last spring. So I can say they were all fantastic. There was no testing last spring. But I did think this was an important piece to update on. So as a part of the Chapter 296 of the Acts of 2018, there was a civics project that's proposed for all students in 8th grade and also in high school. The way we've approached this in North Reading is to have our seniors who are in the civics and government class conduct the projects as well as our 8th grade. So I'm very pleased to say I've met with Mr. Colleen as well as the principals of the middle school and the high school, and our Catherine Jones and Matthew Housting are two leaders of the social studies department at the middle school, high school. We are very well positioned, with respect to many other districts, I think, in being proactive in addressing this year. There is an expectation, despite COVID, despite everything, that this gets addressed this year, and I think we're going to have a great idea and a great program. Obviously, it's going to look very different this year. So the first step that we're trying to look at, and we already have a tremendous community service program at the high school. So we're trying to reconcile, first of all, the differences between community service and a civics project, and also not losing some of the great aspects of what we already have with our community service. I think, I think the civics project is different. It's a little bit deeper. You're not running a canned food drive. You are, developing and getting to the root cause of hunger, and coming up with a much larger system. So it's a much deeper, much more involved project, but there's still a need for volunteers. There's still a need for kids to volunteer at the TOPS program or whatever those different activities are in town, and we want to make sure that both continue and thrive. And so, in addition to that, there's challenges to all of it, community service and civics projects, in COVID, because we have to maintain safety. So I think our leaders and our teacher leaders have done a fantastic job coming up with what this will look like this year. The DESE is going to update their guidance in November, so what I share with you is the original guidance, but they're going to have some amended guidance to help us see through what this will look like next year. There are also specific elements here, so just to walk through quickly what's on page 10 of this document, but students will examine their self and their civic identity. They'll identify an issue. They will research and investigate. They will develop an action plan, and then they actually take action. And then they reflect and they showcase. So at the middle school, obviously, it's going to be much more scaffolded and supported. We're going to strongly encourage working in teams and in group projects. But it is important to do a few things. At the district level, we want to make sure that we've looked at all of our policies. So I'm working with the policy subcommittee in the next few meetings to start to review any policies we have around students not just participating in research, but actually conducting research, students interacting with the media, students interacting with the public and civic government. So I think there's some things to look at there to make sure that the students are supported and protected. And also, I think it's just important, and the reason I put it on the agenda tonight is to make sure that it's clear to the committee, that a lot of these topics will be student-driven. And it is coming from the school, but it's also coming from the students. And so there may be projects or ideas or questions coming out that are different than what we've seen in the past, because students are going to be identifying areas in the community that need improvement, and really part of the assignment is to take action. So we're going to see, maybe in a way that we've never seen before, students getting involved in the community, which I think is fantastic. So an example of what I think an exemplary civics project is, and one thing that's interesting too is the document, and we're going to be sharing this through the faculty meetings at the schools, because yes, a lot of it does live in the social studies civics classes, but it's really interdisciplinary. And your civics project could be about recycling and renewable energy, which now means you're partnering with your science teachers to do research, and it could be connected to a class or project in science. It could be something like what happened in our performing arts program with maskers. And I think, again, part of the guidance, look at existing programs and projects that already exist and what we build on. What we were able to see our students articulate about the haunted walkthrough activity, where they spoke to all of the appropriate safety officers and fire department and everyone, including the Board of Health, and making recommendations on top of everything else in COVID and making sure everything checked out. But we actually had the students figure out who those folks were, go to those meetings, present to the Board of Health. I mean, to do that at age 16, 17, 18 is really taking a leap, you know, in their civic development. So those are the kind of ideas and projects that are out there. But I think it's just important to publicly state at this time of the year that there will be some topics and some conversations that will be coming from the school. I think that obviously these projects need to be, you know, nonpartisan. And I think we can do a great job directing that. And I think we can really guide students with that way. But then there's a question of nonpartisan, and then there's the question of what is perceived to be political or partisan and what isn't, right? So I think there is a potential that we also have to be careful that we're not shutting down ideas that are good ideas because they could be controversial. So there's going to be a slight element of that, and I just think it's important to discuss that publicly, that there's going to be some ideas that are being talked about this year that either are supported and may be, you know, out in the public that get questioned, or maybe they get redirected and that gets questioned. So these things can happen, and I think it's just good to be out ahead of that with the discussion here. And if you have any questions about that, I'd be happy to answer it.
Thank you. Anybody else have any questions, sir? Denise?
I actually read the whole grade 6 thing. A lot of very interesting things came out of it. The political thing I was kind of nervous about, and I guess, you know, it comes down to, one, the teacher, and then two, the students, and, you know, how they're able to decide, is it political, is it not? I read some of the case studies that were done, phenomenal. I mean, very, very well thought out. So interesting. I'd like to see in the future what comes of it.
There's not, thank you for taking that time. And there's been some supports and professional development. You know, I've been to some of these, and I know our leaders have been as well. But no one's done it yet. So there's still a lot, you know, all the examples are based upon theory, and, you know, so I think trying to pull this together and put it out there, there's going to be some learning curve to it all. But I think our teachers are very, very well aware of, and that was part of what we talked about in our meetings recently, is about how do we respectfully and politely engage the students in a discussion about whether this is the right to do now, what the outcomes are going to be, and, you know, without them feeling like their values or their ideas aren't important, just because they may be controversial. So it's very, and that's really what civic discussion is all about.
I also, if you don't mind, some of the extracurricular clubs actually kind of fall into this. I'm thinking, is it Samantha Harvard? Then there's the one that they go to the elderly, not housing, like the nursing home, and they, you know, do cards, or they sing, or they participate and stuff. That is almost, it's like, you know, could be part of that, but they've taken it upon themselves to do. So I thought it was very interesting.
It is, and it's interesting too, because there's a few clubs that are coming before you in the next few weeks that, before they come forward, though, I'm going to have the discussion about whether, is this a club or does this just become someone's project? Because part of what the project has to be, it has to be new and it has to be sustainable. So it can't just be joining a club and doing the work. You actually have to research it, come up with it. So, you know, starting a club that does X, Y, Z, that is more of a project as opposed to participating in it, right? So it always has to be that level. So the example that they use is, you know, someone starts a food pantry, you can't just then take that over the next year. You can't just, you know, replicate that. You have to do something different. But at the same time, I think part of a project is that it should be sustainable, and so students would be able to. So there's a lot of different things that we're working out right now to consider. But I do think that that's very interesting. You know, how we look at our existing clubs and really make them student run, and, you know, I think that's going to be a big part of this conversation. Great point.
Chris, any comments?
You know, I'd kind of double up on Janine's phrase. I think this is exactly the kind of direction that I think we should be going in. And I could kind of wax poetic, but I won't. But it's a great idea. I'm I'm really glad to see us going this way.
Great.
So your point about the political, there are so many issues that may come up in this that in a vacuum are not political. There are things that some people may think are more important than others, but they're not inherently political. But of course, in our polarized times, they tend to be associated with one side or the other, and that's unfortunate. It seems like, and there may be some that you feel are certainly judgment of the administrators and the faculty who are working on this. I in general support, but it seems like there is an opportunity to encourage how not only that you guys engage with the students on this, but that the students are, how do they engage with the public on it in a way that is not confrontational or isn't perceived as being confrontational or political? And that to me could be a huge benefit to this whole thing. So, and I guess what I'm saying is that, as I say, there are certainly some issues that you may just need to stay away from, but otherwise, I hope that we don't shy away from too much, and that give them an opportunity to try to figure some of that stuff out.
And present it in such a way, like you said, that's not confrontational, that can actually achieve progress for the cause that you're.
And how to build support for something that maybe someone is reflexively not going to support.
I think that's a huge lesson for a lot of folks to learn. So that's exactly what we're doing. So I think that, like I said, setting the stage for it tonight with the conversation that helps us frame it moving forward, I think is a good idea.
I think, so my thoughts on this are something a little bit different. I think the page that I thought was most useful was the page that talked about individual versus small group versus whole class. And I know you mentioned that you were going to be encouraging groups.
Yeah.
I would almost require groups. I'd be worried, number one, if everybody's doing the same sort of topic and multiple people are going to the same, person in town, the recycling committee or whatever, and you have 7 different students that are doing it in 1 year. But also civic projects are about people doing things together.
Yeah.
And so I almost think it should only be allowed to be groups or whole classes and that do it. And so I think it's a great thing. And I mean, the change can start wherever. And I think the one thing that came to mind when I was reading about the civics projects were Mighty Meredith project in North Reading, where Meredith Stacy had something happen and she did this and she got an organization off the ground and running. And, that was one student, one child that did that with her family support, obviously. And, that's a great example. And, I would almost want her to be, a speaker sometimes at some of this about how to do that. But
it's a great idea.
Yeah, but I would really encourage this to be group more than individuals, or even a whole class. I just feel like everything about it lends itself to being a group activity.
Yeah, I think you're certainly going to see that at the middle school, and I think it's being discussed that way at the high school as well. But you're right, those kind of experiences like Mighty Meredith are fantastic, and what an amazing accomplishment for that, for the individuals that have done it. The idea now is that every student, through it being required, will have that same type of experience. And then, the trick with groups is always, making sure that it's equally distributed, who does what, who takes the lead, and so that's the balance. But I do think it does make a lot of sense because I agree, like, the teamwork aspect of this is a huge piece of it.
And I just think a lot of people are going to have the same thing. And I guess you could have different ideas or different projects on the same, like recycling. But I think you might get something a little bit more robust and well thought out and a better chance of actually continuing if you are working together, rather than everybody working, their own angles of the same project. But okay, so we don't need a vote on it. It was just a discussion, which is
I'll probably have in the spring students come in and talk a little bit of what they've done this year. I think that would be a nice, bookend to the discussion.
Okay. The most exciting part of the meeting, we're going to policies. Janine and Chris, we're turning it over to you. Don't worry, I have some notes on these, Janine.
You
know I
do? My goodness. Chris, I'll let you take the lead, how's that?
You beat me to it. I was going to let you take the lead, Janine. Oh no, I'm flipping for you. Yeah, I didn't have the document pulled up. Let me pull that up. We went through. It was, I mean, really, it's like it was more of the technical side of updating the legal language surrounding Title IX, and updating some of the terminology to support that, and that's kind of it. There weren't. Correct me if I'm wrong, Dr. Daly. I don't think we ended up making any dramatic changes other than really putting in Mr. Colleen's name and trying to clear up things pertaining to his new position.
Sure. And just to make it clear, these are federal laws changed. These are policy updates to reflect the changes to federal law, and they were drafted by our council. There were some questions that were raised that I did bring up to the council about trying to have a common definition of different items. There are differences between state and federal law, and some of the definitions, we do have two different pieces of advice on what that definition should look like, but we're going to try and reconcile that language as it was presented. But essentially what I believe was clarified for me is that it's really policy AC that needs to get adopted here, and then a lot of the other pieces can be updated and revised more as the procedures from there. So we
so it's difficult, and the procedures are sort of an addendum to the policy or a second, right? That would also be approved, though, right? I mean, I didn't go back and look at the manual, but it's it might be policy C, and then there's an AC R or something that is the procedure. That would also be approved, or I think we could improve that in the past. I'm not.
Yeah, we can clarify that. Well, the way it was presented to me is that possibly not everything, changes to the handbook, some of the things can be changed a little bit, as long as the governing policy is still there, that some of those other pieces that are under them can be changed a little bit more easily. And we certainly have policies that, as people change positions and roles, certain aspects need to get updated every year.
Yeah.
And the like.
Yeah, things like that.
So some of what I share with you 4 documents there in the packet. Some of them are more like the handbook language, right? So it's a little bit different, but I just wanted to share everything that was there to be updated. So there are some pieces that we do need to add. I believe we do have some changes now based on our most recent training, because we have to identify, it's no longer just one person. Well, there's still one person who's a Title IX coordinator, but now there are 4 or 5 other roles that need to be assigned as a part of our process. And it's not just, or his or her designee. We have a decision maker, we have an investigator, we have an appeal, we have an informal resolution coordinator. So we are going to assign all those pieces in our process, and once that's approved, so that will be in there for the final reading, that you'll see that all as delineated, and then it will be shared. And our training notes and materials also will be posted in accordance with the law. So we've done that. This law has been went into effect this summer. It, at the moment, I will say these changes to the laws look to be that they'll be here for a little bit. There was, 17 attorneys general filed a lawsuit to try to not have these take place. I will go on the record as saying there are pieces of this that I am not really in favor of. I don't think that they work very well for victims that are coming forward, and I don't think that they work very well for, I don't think that they work very well for their intended purposes for K-12. I think they were written more with the higher ed in mind a little bit. And I think there are some limitations, and I understand, I guess what I'm saying is I can understand why there was a lawsuit filed by the Attorney General, including Massachusetts. But at the moment, this is the law of the land, and this is why we're updating what's in there.
Okay. So, yeah, I was a little confused about what was what. Like, I didn't touch the procedures because I felt like they were drafted by lawyers, and I just see the links to them, so I was wondering what we have to approve, if we have to approve just the policy and the handbook language, and then the procedures are part of that, and just a reference to it, or if you want an approval on the procedures itself too.
Yeah, I would say AC, yeah, the policy and the handbook language could be approved for a first reading. And then I'll make those changes. I just wanted to share everything with you, but I think it's just policy AC and then the handbook language that would be updated.
Why don't we start with policy AC?
Well, before we go into that, on the policy AC, on the fourth paragraph,
This is designated.
yes,
Yep.
it actually the first thing, it says the superintendent shall adopt and publish one or more grievance procedures for addressing reports of discrimination, harassment, retaliation, and the blah, 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 blah. Do we have an ACR?
Currently,
Yes.
not sure.
Because it's basically, if we approve this reading, then according to this paragraph, the first sentence, either you need to come up with one or we need to.
Wasn't that what these other policies are, the civil rights grievance procedure?
Well, and that's what I was wondering, are they gonna be then ACR 1 and ACR 2?
Well, I'm looking at the manual now, and policy AC is actually the school district organization plan. So I'm confused by the number.
Well, Mass also has different letters for
Yeah,
their.
ours are GA and GAR, so I believe we do have.
Okay.
So this would be policy GA, is what we'd be adopting?
So I can pull up those other ones. We looked at them in the policy subcommittee. I didn't put them in the packet. I can try to get on. I don't know if you're on there now, Richard. I believe it's GA.
GA is, it's actually a section, it must be GAA or
Yeah, I think that's what it is. GAA, GAB.
non-discrimination is that what we're talking about?
Non-discrimination and harassment?
And her-
Yeah, that's exactly GAAA for some.
Yep.
AAA?
And to your question, Janine, there is a GAAR.
JCAR. And so we have two policies. We have one for students and one for staff. And we would probably do it that same way. And they're the same procedure. It's just sort of addressed, and it's in two different places in the book. So we would be replacing all the existing, so GAAA and then JCAR, and then there's also a corresponding one for staff.
Gonna be following at home, is the exciting part of this meeting.
So I guess I'm just thinking that if I'm going to vote to approve a policy, I want to have it in front of me that has the right designation on it, and I know where it's going to go and what it's replacing. So I feel like maybe we should hold off and we should be ready to go in the manual, I guess is what I'm thinking.
Well, this is just the first reading, so.
Right, but the
Are
second
we
reading has to be the
calling it
same.
GA or AAC?
Sorry?
Are we going to then draft it under our lettering or change it to AC? I guess is kind of the question.
I guess I'm saying that the document that we have in front of us says AC, and that's clearly not fitting into our structure,
Yeah.
whatever, right or wrong. And I feel more comfortable voting on a policy that is the final thing that's going to go right into the manual with the right letter designation.
Okay.
I don't disagree with Rich, actually. I mean, I was wondering if it's a little bit premature. I think putting the title on there, but also some of the references, inserting the link, like, again, some of the references, like Janine was mentioning about you know, what are the procedures, or what's the procedure the regulation that's with the policy, kind of getting that all together. What I would suggest though is that maybe we don't do a first reading tonight, maybe we just see if there's any specific comments we had on things.
Right, get it out of there, yeah.
Just to do that, and then we can maybe very quickly at the next meeting do the first reading and then do another reading after that.
My only concern is that this is in effect since August, and I want to make sure that it gets on there. If we need to update this. So because of COVID and other things, we're a little delayed. So it, in effect, it's replacing the current Title IX. You know, everything that's in there now needs to come out, and it's going to replace it.
If you think there's time urgency to it, I'd be, again, I mean, we can at least put it up and you can vote against it if you want, Rich, but I mean, if you wanna.
I appreciate it.
On the second reading, can we amend it from AC to the current GAA, blah, 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 but the wording is okay?
Yeah, I think typically it's an AC. I'm not sure why ours is a GAE. I don't know if anyone knows the history of why it's lettered as it is. I would have to research that a little bit. But
for first reading, why don't we just do, if we're worried about the timing, for first reading, why don't we just do the content of it, understanding that we need to know where it's fitting into the policy. And again, like I said in the beginning, I want to make sure I'm very clear about like the civil rights grievance procedure. Is that a regulation that's going in somewhere? Or is that just a reference to something else? Like, where does all of this lie? Like, if I want to go find the civil rights grievance procedure, is that in the school committee policies? Is that on the district website somewhere? Like,
yeah, so some of this is on the website posted, right, as the grievance procedure. Some of it is a policy, and then some of it is handbook.
I just think before we do a final version of this, even if we, you know, if we do the first reading of this, I think we need to, you know, have all the links put in. I think we need to have labels on exactly what's there and make it very clear about where this is going. I don't think it's that much different than if we, you know, if there was an error and we said we'd accept it with that on there. And so I do agree with Rich, like if there wasn't any time urgency to it, like I would just say, just go back and clean it up and then come back again. But if you feel like we should get to it now, I'm fine with that.
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned with this. Like if we do a second reading, we can clean it up for the second one. I just want to get it up yesterday, just because if we have something out there now, I want to make sure that we're following the right procedure. It's very clear.
Okay. So why don't we do one at a time? Janine, do you want to start with or Chris, I think Janine told you were in charge of that. Do you want to lead us through the non-discrimination and harassment, which was labeled file AC, but it's going to be something else?
Yep. I'll tell you what, Janine, we're going to trade off. We'll share tonight. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, excuse me, Dr. Daly kind of explained the bulk of it, but just do you want to read into the record basically what it is?
Well, why don't we have a motion? Why don't we have a motion, a second, and then we can discuss anything that is, you know, might.
Yeah. I move that we accept as a first read the non-discrimination and harassment policy labeled right now as file AC.
Okay. A second?
I'll second.
Okay, so discussion. The first point was we need to clarify where it's going into the policies.
In accordance with our policies lettered, yes.
Correct. The second point, which I agreed with also with Janine pointing out that if there's a grievance procedure that is being published, that we should add that reference in. I saw no other questions or concerns on this one. Did anybody else?
I do not.
Okay. So with that,
Nope.
Yeah, go ahead, Chris.
I was agreeing.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. I'll do a roll call vote. Chris?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, so passes for first reading 4-0. Now,
Thank you for understanding. So again, just we're building a ship as we're flying a little bit here, and it's building a plane as we're flying. And I guess we're building a ship as we're flying. That feels more right. So, but it's just important for us to keep moving forward. So we'll get those items corrected for sure.
okay, and so I feel like the the two procedures are references in both of these, both the handbook and the other one. So why don't we take the handbook language next, Title IX of the Education Amendment of 1972.
Yep.
This is in the student and employee handbooks. So Chris, do you want to make a motion on this
Yep.
one?
I move that we accept for a first read the Title IX of the Education Amendments of 1972 update to our policy.
Have a second?
Yes, and just for clarification, this is for the handbook, correct?
So the student and the employee handbook
There you go.
are two different handbooks.
Yeah.
Get that.
Second. Okay, discussion on this one. My only comment was in paragraph number 1, the first line talks about on the basis of sex. The second line talks about on the basis of sex harassment based on gender, sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy, and pregnancy status. Then the third line goes back to just sex.
Mhm.
And I just wonder if the language, the more inclusive language should be in all three of them or somehow, it just seems like.
And that's what I was referring to earlier. So that was brought up at the discussion, and so I brought that back to the council that wrote it. They said they'd be able to take a look at it. Different laws cite different things, and some of the laws don't extend to certain protected classes and categories. And so having that one definition that includes, let's say, homelessness, we also have genetic identity, genetic information in some of our definitions. There's some question about whether we could have those in all of these policies. So we're gonna try and work on that with the council to have them updated a little bit.
Yeah, because it just seems like, well, there's something you can't harass about, but you can discriminate or not hire them for. And it just seems like, just because the law makes a minimum standard, I don't know that it means we shouldn't have a more inclusive standard than minimum requirement. So that's my only concerns about that. Those,
Yeah,
like those three.
So it is a little bit complicated because there's certain things that we can't begin our investigation on, and it doesn't then fall into this policy or procedure. It gets funneled out. So we do have to be. I don't know that it can be one size fits all for that. So that's what they're going to look into.
Yeah, at the end of the day, the language, yeah, the requirement to meet the government's report, the legal requirement is one thing.
Yeah.
Any policy that we want to put in place would have to be I would think, a set aside, a separate, or not refer to Title IX.
Well, if nothing else, to me, it calls that out by putting it in the middle of that.
Yeah.
I would almost like put that other definition either later on or first, just so it's not.
I think some of it certainly can be adjusted. So to be clear.
That one.
Yeah.
My only other comment on the third paragraph, which begins upon receipt. On number 4, I just think school district should be capitalized. Maybe capitalized district throughout. So, other than that, so I guess I won't have any changes on the first comment. It may understand that maybe there'll be additional changes later on, but do other people have any concerns with anything? And obviously we have to put in the links here before we do the final approval of anything.
No, that's fine. This isn't quite the same yet. I think it's fine.
Okay. So we have a motion, we have a second. We'll do a roll call vote on this motion. Chris?
Aye.
Janine?
Hi.
Rich?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well, 4-0. Now, do we want to do motions on the two procedures?
I would venture to hold off just so that we can maybe get a little bit more, if it's not an urgent thing, for the reasons discussed earlier. One, having clarification that the wording should be the same throughout, and to find out, do a little bit of investigative work to find out where the lettering should fall within our policy. Is it, going to be following along AC, or is it going to fall where Rich said closer into the GA section?
Are you okay with holding off on the procedures or regulations for a little bit?
I think the most important thing is to get AC.
Okay. Why don't we pass over on that aspect of it, and we can take up first reading of that, and take up the second reading of the policy next time.
That works.
Very good.
Okay. Moving on to school cancellation and delay procedures.
So I just wanted to share again, and I have this on as a vote as well, similar to the last. It's a slight change this year, and I did communicate this out with the committee, and I did share it with the community in advance of what ended up being our first snow fall of the year. But we did add into our toolbox this year a remote snow day, which we did discuss earlier tonight with Sophia on the call as well. You know, the one thing I wanted to raise publicly is that, you know, folks will say, you know, we've taken so much away from students, they still should be able to have a snow day where they can make snowmen and bake cookies and do all that. And I completely agree with that. And I'm not saying that we're never going to have a snow day again, but I think to have this as a tool in our toolbox, let's say that there's multiple snow days. Let's say that there is, like I mentioned earlier, an icy storm, where instead of doing a 90-minute delay, we say everyone stay home and we start school at 8 o'clock. I mean, I think it makes a lot of sense to be able to do that and to have that at our disposal as we need it. You know, why would I ever call a delay on a Wednesday when the elementary schools are getting out in the middle of the day, right? So this way you do a remote day, everybody's remote, and the learning continues. I just think it makes a lot of sense. So we've already put it out there, so I'm hoping that it gets supported in public officially. But I did want to bring that forward tonight for discussion if anyone had any comments for us to consider.
Well, I strongly disagree. I'm just kidding.
No.
I have no comments or issues, and people want to make snowmen, they can make it after the school day's over.
Yeah.
Perfectly fine with me.
I mean, it all ends up being your discretion in any event, so, you know, you can sort of, as you say, sort of work that whatever seems to make most sense in the situation. I mean, one of the things that it avoids is that those cuspy days where you have to call school, but then by noon it's sunny and the streets are clear, and you avoid those kind of ones where everyone's complaining because why'd you call school? You know, why'd you call school when it turned out to be great?
So what you're saying is Patrick has a very easy job now with this policy.
Yeah, it's been
a pretty easy job for you.
The whole thing's been very easy. Yeah, no, I mean,
I agree. I think people will still be, you know, wanting kids in school, and our preference is going to be in person whenever we can. But I think this is just, you know, something we can use to make some sense as needed throughout the year. And it's, you know, it's being listed. You know, it was approved by the Department of Ed for this year only. And you know, we did talk about it. I've talked about it basically all since the summer when it was first presented. But we officially were given the clearance a few weeks ago to do something like this for this year only. But I think it only makes sense, and it reinforces, you know, all the learning that we're able to do in hybrid, that we have been able to shift at different times, and it's been successful. And I think it's something that we can use this year effectively. So
I think it's silly if kids are going to be home to not have it count,
right?
Because frankly, we can do it, and it's just going to extend school longer, and we're all going to want to be out at the end of the year. So.
Just to clarify too, we wouldn't be doing this if there was an extreme power outage and we couldn't do that. We're not planning necessarily a quote-unquote blizzard bag where the students are doing some asynchronous activity on that day. The idea is that they would be logging in, teachers would be interacting with them, it would be an engaging school day just delivered remotely. So, similar to what we're proposing for the next few, before the Thanksgiving.
Okay. So do we have
I will say that we had the same system in place for the last few years in Wakefield when I was teaching. And surprisingly, the people that liked it least were the seniors because they felt it robbed them of their free snow days. Yeah. I think we have more understanding in our district, and it'll work out.
You can dissent on behalf of the seniors if you'd like, Chris.
But yeah, in the honor, I'll just say no. It's we've got technology. There's no I think there's no real reason not to do this. It makes too much sense.
Okay. Can I have a motion to approve the school cancellation and delay procedures?
I will move to approve the school cancellation and delay procedures for this year.
I'll second.
Okay, we'll call a vote. Chris?
Aye.
Rich?
Aye?
Janine?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. That was 4-0. I almost called you Diane. I don't know why.
All right.
Okay, moving on. There's no minutes to approve tonight. Budget update. Mr. Connolly?
Yes, thank you. So there is a budget update. There's not a lot of really new information here from the September report. But there's not a lot of changes with the line items, but as a refresher, we certainly purchased a lot of supplies and equipment needs at the start of the year, all related to additional needs based on the COVID-19 virus as we prepare for the reopening of schools. Despite a lot of these new expenses that cropped up, I do believe we are in solid financial standing. Many, if not all, of these expenses for the PPE, cleaning, sanitation, computer devices, various HVAC upgrades, window repairs, et cetera, that were incurred across all 5 schools in the district are being able to be charged to federal grants, including pre-opening grant and all these essentials grants that we received and secured by the beginning of September. Additional supplies and equipment that are needed beyond these expenses that we have momentarily charged to the general fund, but we do anticipate working pretty closely with the town finance director and the town administrator to journalize these expenses to the CARES Act funding that the town of North Reading has received for COVID expenses. So on the bottom of the report, as we reflected in the September report, we may see some of these expenses. I do know that the town finance director, Elizabeth Rourke, was in the process of drawing down funds from this account through the federal process, and we do have a conference call tomorrow to just kind of make sure that we're on the same page of how these journal entries will occur, but we certainly anticipate that the funds reflected on the bottom of page 1 of the report, at the bottom of the page that indicates COVID-19 expenses, that those will eventually be transferred over to the CARES Act funding. On the payroll side of the budget, I think we're certainly, as I expressed in September, had a need to fill long-term substitutes, but we certainly don't anticipate that having a significant impact on the substitute budget. We have hired several new positions, including building substitutes, in some cases instructional learning aides or remote learning aides, to help others in the active kindergarten program as well as in our elementary schools. We did hire a quota nurse, additional custodial staff, and some technology technicians to help deploy the new devices, all of which we anticipate being able to be charged to the federal reopening or technology essential grants. Some of the other line items is balance in the administration line, as I spoke of last time, mainly due to the delaying in funding of the assistant superintendent. There's a balance in some other line items, special education, transportation payroll lines now, mainly due to as many needed hours from the drivers themselves, us not transporting as many students. The food service program I spoke of in September. I spoke of it earlier, so we continue to do what we can to increase participation in both the grab and go as well as the in-school program. Again, everything continues to be free now until the end of the year. Unfortunately, I did get confirmation that the $55,000 grant that I applied for was not awarded. So I am working, and one of the things I'll be speaking with the town officials on is to try to make some of those startup expenses that were certainly the result of COVID also part of the CARES Act funding. Certainly there was equipment and plexiglass and startup packaging and materials that need to be purchased. But really at this point, I think despite the situation that we were needed to address with reopening, I think we've developed some good relationships with vendors, supply vendors, PPE vendors to get the materials that we need at a competitive price, quickly. And again, the biggest, I would say, the biggest volatility or risk is just around the special revenue accounts, which we're working on monitoring, but I think at this point, I think 4 months in, despite what we've dealt with, I think we are in solid financial state. With that being said, I will turn it over to any questions.
Could you refresh my memory? What was the grant for the 55 that you applied for, didn't get, and what was their rationale behind that grant?
So it was a food service emergency feeding grant through the state. It's highly competitive. I think you may have seen Governor Baker kind of doing some press conferences speaking that they were awarding this grant on a rolling basis to many, it wasn't just for school districts, it was for any food shelters, pantries out there that were opening up emergency feeding sites. School districts were eligible, and it really was just that it was just too competitive was the rationale. And I think maybe they focused on some other kind of statewide feeding sites for what we were looking to do to start up the school. So I think, some districts, I think, kind of worked some of those expenses into that reopening grant. Most of it, the majority of our reopening grant went towards kind of instructional needs and building HVAC-related upgrades, technology, and needs for technicians, additional Florida nurse, and so forth. So we went that route, and I'm reasonably confident that the funding will be able to be part of the municipal tax CARES Act process.
Any other questions? Hearing none. Move on to staffing. Taylor?
I wanted to share some new hires that have happened since the last time we've communicated. Cynthia Wilkerson, special education teacher, long-term substitute. Michelle Rosenthal, general paraprofessional. And Pam Ellis, remote learning support assistant. This is one of the new positions we just spoke about, all at the bachelor school. The middle school, Benjamin Kelleher, special education paraprofessional, a long-term sub. Janice Wilk, a special ed paraprofessional, a long-term sub. At the high school, we've hired Michael Fitzpatrick as a building custodian. At the district level, we've hired Tasha Wilder as the HR liaison. This is a new position replacing Maggie Dalton, who retired after 22 years of service to the district, and she's a lifelong Hornet. And we, if you did see the sign as we were driving in on 62, we did have a nice little tribute to Maggie on there for her many years of service to the district. She was our payroll, she was a senior accountant in the district for many years. So we've taken the position in a slightly different direction. Tasha comes in with experience at the higher education level at MIT and Merrimack as an HR liaison, and she's been a great fit in our department. So we wish Maggie the best and welcome these new folks into the district.
Wonderful. I welcome all of them, and especially Mrs. Wilson, because she's going to be working with a particular student that I'm very familiar with.
A little bit.
Bids and donations, Mr. McCowan.
Yes, we have a small handful here. I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a generous donation of $1,000 from Haibo Shang and Yan Wu Shang to be used at the principal's discretion in North Reading Middle School.
Second.
Okay, any discussion? Roll call vote. Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Aye as well.
Aye.
Passes 4-0. Thank you.
I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a generous donation of $1,000 from Haibo Shang and Yan Wu Shang to be used at the principal's discretion at North Reading High School.
I'll second.
Okay. Roll call vote again. Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
I'm an aye as well. Passes 4-0.
Very generous in those votes.
I know.
And I move that the school committee vote to accept with gratitude a donation of $1,000 from the North Reading High School class of 2020 to fund the purchase of a new electric sign at the high school.
Second.
Roll call vote again. Rich?
Aye.
Janine?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
And I as well. That's the 4-0.
That's your leftover money?
Yes.
Wait, that's the higher amount than usual, isn't it? Or is it, maybe it's not, and maybe the circumstances would have dictated.
Right, it was similar. I think there have been ranges between maybe 1,000 and 1,500.
Okay. Moving on to subcommittees, before I just go into the different updates, I'd like to thank Mr. McGowan. The select board member, Rich Wallner, reached out to me asking if somebody would be interested in speaking with UMass, who's doing a research study on aging communities and possibly some involvement in, on planning for some intergenerational buildings and planning in the future. And so I reached out to a couple of committee members, and Mr. McGowan graciously volunteered to speak with Mr. Wallner and help with that.
And thanks for bringing it up, Scott, because since I am sort of representing the committee, it's probably good to let everybody know what is happening. And I had a nice long discussion with Mr. Wallner, who has, I think come in to his position, I guess, last year with a particular vision about, the need to improve not just senior services, but just overall, an overall effort to improve North Reading as a place that welcomes seniors, and partly, especially in terms of how it impacts the school committee, to try to keep seniors here and not have them, not have folks leave town as soon as their kids graduate from school. And we can obviously all recognize the financial benefits of that in schools. And so we had a really good discussion, and he's put me in contact with this group, which is the first step from his point of view in terms of figuring out, sort of beginning that process of what will ultimately lead to hopefully some kind of planning process. So good.
Thank you for doing that. Policy Subcommittee met on October 29th. Brianna, do you want to update on that?
Not much to say from what we spoke about earlier. It was going over the 4 things, 2 of which we did a first reading on, and 2 of which we will do a first reading on.
One. Upcoming subcommittee meetings, athletic subcommittee meeting November 18th at 1 p.m. virtually. Fine arts subcommittee meeting same day at 3:30 p.m. Finance planning is meeting December 1st at 8 a.m. I should have told you that, Rich, but there you go.
Dr. Daly sent out a meeting invite.
Very good.
Oh.
But it is 8 a.m., not 8:30 this time. So, for administrative report, Dr. Daly, do you have anything?
I have nothing further to say.
My only question that I forgot to ask earlier, but I'll ask it now that I remember it, but I know last year, one thing that we talked a lot about was when we opened again, whether or not there was, that gap has grown between, students that don't need assistance and students that do. I'm just wondering, in terms of like special education, like have we seen, more of a need this year? I mean, have we seen that gap grow, or do we feel like, I'm just wondering from a special education standpoint, like, have we seen a need for more services for more students, or are we doing, sort of the way we were before? I don't know if that's a good question, but something I was thinking about.
Are you saying students that are remote?
Well, we were worried last year that when we just shut down and we went to full remote for 3 months, that there was a gap between students that needed services and students that didn't, and that gap was going to grow. And one thing that we haven't really talked about was, have we seen that happen? Have we seen that kids fell further behind, or more kids need additional services? Or do we feel like, people are doing okay and there's no real big, this isn't just necessarily a budget question. This is just more like, I don't know, how are we doing? I mean, did that gap grow, or are we doing okay still?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of different ways to look at that. I will say that we were very concerned last spring, nationally about what this would mean for kids that were out for that period of time. I think our students were very much engaged. It wasn't the same, but they were engaged to the point, and I have not heard across the board from principals or teachers that, oh my goodness, my students are so much further behind than they typically are in September, October, November. We haven't heard that. I think it's definitely different, and we've prioritized. We've had a lot of conversations about what needs to be prioritized, what can go. We had to do that anyway with 170 days as opposed to 180 days, right? But I can report that I'm not hearing consistently that the gaps are huge and we can't fill them and this and that. I think with special education services, there are certainly some compensatory services that are needed that we need to do to fill gaps or to support students. And I do think there are many students that are having, any time remotely is difficult. And that's for special education, and that's for a whole variety of different needs. And that's why we're really trying to address that with students. But I'm not getting the sense, and certainly the diagnostic test that we've given, I have not heard any feedback, but I will inquire a little bit more, and maybe I can have some other folks present as well on this. But I have not heard that across the board, students are behind. I'm not hearing that. So I feel that is something I would hear quite a bit of. Even as we talk about the quarter ending coming up and working on report cards, I'm not hearing that all of it needs to be changed and reallocated because we're not going to be able to meet something or kids weren't ready for fourth grade, they're still working at third grade. I'm not hearing that. I think our students progress. I think that's a testament to our teachers and also to our parents and families that they kept learning, going through the spring and obviously in the summer. I think everyone was proactive with this and kept it going.
Yeah, I mean, it's on my mind more than anything right now, just because I attended a webinar today that CPAC sponsored. It wasn't by CPAC, but it's about ABLE accounts, and it just was on my head and on my mind. And I wonder if even in the future, maybe in a future meeting, if Conan ever wanted to, present on kind of how special education is going.
Sure.
I think it's an important part for us to understand, and especially when budget is coming up, just understanding there are budgetary impacts on it. So
yeah, I think that's the person that was crossing my mind as I was saying that.
Yeah.
We had some very good discussions today at our administrative council with some outside of the box ideas that I think we have to start going there. I think we can get, we're finally over this quote unquote reopening hurdle. And now we're trying to think about, okay, what can we do differently? If we can't bring everybody back all at once, how can we be outside of the box to get more kids in person in different ways? So we threw a lot of ideas out there, and I'm not going to discuss them yet because they're still in that early stage, but I think we're going to need to come up with some creative ways to get kids back more in person for those, because that in-person connection makes all the difference for some kids, and it motivates them and it inspires them, and we have to try to get that as much as we possibly can. So how can we support those students on their remote days? The fact that we're in 3 and 2 is, like I said, that is better than, obviously 5 days is what we're going for, but on those 2 days each week that they're out, how do we help them out and get them what they need? So we're going to keep talking about that.
Has clubs and organizations all started yet? I mean, maybe at the high school, but maybe at the middle school, I don't think they have, or...
Yeah, so everyone, it's a little bit delayed. The first phase was just figuring out what could run, what they would look like, and how they would run. And we are in the process right now. Some of the high school clubs have started. The middle school clubs are just about ready. They're getting proposed right now and finalized. So just about everything is running virtually. There's some discussion about what it looks like if you weren't in full remote, that you can join virtually. But if anything does meet on campus, it's really going to be for those students who are already here that day. We're not going to have, with the clubs at least, we're not going to have that cross cohorting at the middle school level. But I think teachers have done a great job, like they have with everything else, coming up with creative ways to run a club virtually, or a slightly different club this year that still has the spirit of the other club but functions well in this environment of a hybrid environment.
Very much.
Since you're bringing up some different topics, quick question. I've noticed you've probably seen this too, Scott, that number of districts have talked about encouraging the department to postpone or not have the MCAS exam again this year. And I was wondering where you stood on, where the district stands on being able to adequately prepare students for the MCAS exam coming up this year, assuming it is held, and whether we need to talk about joining that effort.
Sure. So, I think that we're fine either way. My biggest concern with it is the actual time that it will take to administer the exams. What we're operating under right now, first of all, federal law would have to change and state law would have to change. To try to do all that and get that all done, I think in the year of an election, it's not happening until after this. I don't know that it's going to get resolved and changed before January, February, which is when we would have to do. So we have to run last spring's exams for the current juniors in January, February. Then we have to do another set of exams in the spring as well. So there's a part of me that says it's crazy that it's happening and it needs to not happen. There's another part of me that says we can make the adjustments. I did have some concerns around the technology. Dr. Downs has assured me that he feels that we'll be able to remotely push out some of the test navigation to the devices. In the past, we used to have to collect them and do them manually, and I was very concerned with the time that would take. And now you're not just taking a tool away from a kid, you're taking their access to their education away if they don't have their device to do remote learning. But he assured me he feels like he can turn that around pretty quickly. So honestly, I feel like we probably will be able to do the testing, and it's not going to be a huge issue, and I think students will be prepared and they will do well. But I also can understand the reason why there would be a resolution, just to say, can we consider, why do we need to do this year? So I would support either voice, but I think I don't know that it's not as simple as if every local committee demands it, it's going to make a change, because federal law and state law would have to be changed. It did happen in the spring, but there has been no, I think the commissioner is fully aware of this and that it should happen, but he has not indicated in any way that there's any changes to this. I will even say that I'm aware that they're going to be piloting the social studies MCAT this year, and our 8th grade teachers are looking forward to piloting that and learning about it. So, I think our teachers, testing is what it is, and we're willing to do that as we need to. So, it's a complicated issue.
Yes, no, I agree.
Yeah.
And I think it's something where we just need to think whether we need to advocate for North Reading, and that doesn't sound like we need to. So.
Yeah, I saw it and deleted that email.
Yeah.
I think just getting into testing is tough. It's one of those no-win situations where I don't know. So see what happens when you don't bring in an administrative report. So for correspondence, have you received anything, Dr. Daly?
I haven't done it this time.
I think correspondence that I received was parents who reached out about the science curriculum at the middle school. I forwarded to Dr. Daly, forwarded to the principal, but it was interesting. So I think it's good to hear from people every once in a while, not complaining about something, just making a suggestion.
Yeah, the suggestion being, is there a way to have an advanced pathway for science as well as there is for math, which I think is a very good question that we can explore. It's very different in that the state frameworks for math actually identify an accelerated pathway to calculus. There's courses, there's curriculum written, and we're following a pathway right from the frameworks, but the reason why you would want it for math also would exist for science, and I think it makes some sense. And we always ask that question, what are we doing for students who've already learned the standard? And, so it's something I will discuss with our science leaders and our principals about, is there an opportunity here for some advanced coursework for students in science as well as math? We've done it through electives, certainly, and we've put our efforts into that and making those electives required, so there's not electives, having a STEM course for all students. But I think that obviously is also going to lead to more students being more students now have more science under their belt than they ever have before, so maybe there's still a need now for another pathway for kids. So I think it's a great thing to explore, and we'll certainly look at it.
The reason you always reach out to Daly about this, not me, is because he understands it far better than I do. So, okay, future business. We have a meeting on November 19th. There'll be a meeting on December 10th. If there's nothing else, I'll entertain a motion to dismiss.
So moved.
Second? Okay.
I was
roll
not
call.
yawning when I said that.
Janine?
Aye.
Rich? Aye. Chris?
Hi.
I'm an aye as well. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.